The next section I've actually got to work on is this. This bit of rusted area here I'll cut out and make a repair section for this. Once again, the repair section is pretty simple. Just straight files, I do those on the bench. Fitting it, and that's always the longest part. Got to make sure it's flush with the sill, and make sure that the closing panel here is in the right position when the repair is done. So I'll work on that next. I always say it shouldn't take long, but who knows? It's only a small repair. The larger repair, let's turn the light round, is this one. The transmission tunnel with the handbrake section. So this all needs to be rebuilt in and around here. I might work on the rear section first, just to get that section of the panel done, and these sections in here will weld to that. Before I can do the whole lot, I'll probably need to put this cross member in. Now I've got a replacement for that, and that will dictate the position for the edge of the transmission tunnel. The placement of that, it fits into the gearbox mounting bolts, or actually contains the gearbox mounting bolts. Well, I've got a template I made for underneath of that. You can see that there. That plate actually lines up with the bolt holes. So point to it. They're the mounting bolts in the cross member, or the captive nuts. They line up with a hole in this plate, so I can position this cross member, which will then enable me to complete the repairs to this end of the transmission tunnel. Now I've made up a simple repair section for this, just on the bottom end. I haven't cut the hole out. I'll actually file that once I've got the weld in place. The rear edge here is curved. The reason I do that is that if it was at right angles, you'd tend to blow the weld through on the corner. There's less chance of blow through if you curve it. So I've done that. There's a little bit more I've got to take out, probably here, before I weld it in. But also I've got to just take that off now. I've got to put the plug weld holes in the bottom section here before I weld it in, so I'll do that now. Now this repair section is being welded in stages. The first stage was to do the weld along the straight edge here. I didn't do the return around the curve there. The reason for that is that when you weld this in, these two along the weld, it shrinks and the panel distorts. So in this case, this panel tipped out this way. Now had I welded that, it would have been would have been more difficult to get rid of the distortion. So what I did is to weld this first, then with a dolly and hammer relieve the shrinkage along here by tapping it and straightening it so the panel straightened back up. Now I'll finish that weld. So once I do that, then I'll clean the welds up. It just roughly cleaned so I can straighten the panel. The repairs are now complete. I've just finished off the the grinding. Obviously I'm not going to weld that in yet because I've got to finalise all of the sills and the floors. Haven't welded this section up. That will be welded when the whole panel is put together against the sill. So anyway, that's finished. I've just locked everything into place. The transmission cover, had to do a little bit of reshaping here because of the new panel, but that's all fixed. These all line up with the original holes, so that should be fine. But what I'm going to do, there's not much left of this except the bit that is used for the gearbox mount, but I'll just cut it away from what's left of the tunnel. So I've got to cut across here and a bit along there. The other side is all rusted out, so that shouldn't be a problem. So the reason for that is I want to get that out and position the new cross member into place. So I'll use that as a reference point pardon me, for repairs to the rear of the tunnel. Now these side panels, I actually bought those, so I've got some replacement parts for that. Sorry, replacement panels for that. They'll have to be fitted, of course, because they don't actually just slot into place. A few little cuts have got to be made, but that's one of the reasons for making sure that I know exactly where the panel actually has to be welded into place. So at this stage I'll cut this out and then put the cross member in and find its true position. I've just been trying to fit the cross member in. I want to get this right before I finish off the transmission tunnel. Just a few fitting problems. It's a couple of millimetres out in terms of where these holes fit with the floor. Not a lot, but I want to get it a little bit better than it is. So I'm just adjusting the angle of the tabs on the end. Also, there was a tab on the top which actually doesn't do anything because it sits over a recess in the inner sill. You can't weld it to anything, so I've cut that off. And when I've been trying to put the bolts in, I've just noticed that you can probably see the angle of that. It's not sitting true, and the reason for that is the captive nut has been welded on crooked, so I'll need to cut that weld, straighten or square that up, and just make fitting the gearbox plate a lot easier. I guess the moral of the story is don't assume that everything you buy in terms of replacement panels is going to fit exactly, or in fact that it's finished the way you may need it to be done. So you really need to look at that, because it starts to cause problems when you try to fit things, and it's no good sort of leaving it like that, in my view. You've got to fix these things before you fit them up. So having said that, I wouldn't make this. I mean, it's great to buy something that's, even if it's 98% right, doesn't take long to adjust it, but just don't assume that they'll drop in. Some things do and other things don't. So it's just a lesson I seem to be learning as I'm going along. I've just finished positioning the cross member. It's now basically tacked in place. A couple of Cleco clips and screws have screwed it in position. This is where it will be welded. There's an even gap between the cross member and the rear bulkhead on both sides, so it should be exactly in the right position. Apart from that, it lines up with the holes in the floor with the gearbox mount, so it should be fine. I've actually screwed down the flange on this side of the tunnel just so I can get the right measurements for the other side. So I'll just pause the video and go around the other side of the car. Now this is the side I've got to work on, the handbrake section. So what I've got to do is to work out how much of this I'll cut out, which is probably most of that rusted bit. The top end of the handbrake area here is solid, gets quite thin towards the bottom, so I've actually got to work out a cutting point for that too. The bottom, I assume there's a bottom bolt for the gearbox lever which is missing on that, so there's a bracket that goes on the inside of the transmission side, so I've got to work out how to fix that. So as I said, on the other side this is all in position, so I know exactly how much I've got to have to drop to the floor. I've got to also repair that back section there, not as much as I had to do on the other side, but still it's got to be done, and also a new seatbelt mount. I'll make one of those to go in. So as I say, the first thing I had to do is to get this in position. This gives me the position for the well, gives me a couple of positions. Position for the side cover here, which I've got to put in. I've purchased one for that. Now it, like most things, doesn't fit as it's provided. It's got to be cut at the end, so I've got to work out exactly where I'll trim that, and that will depend on what I do on the transmission end on this end. So I'll work from here forward, but at this stage I'll tip the car on its side and I'll start to cut into this and work out which bits I've got to fabricate. I apologise for the background noise, that's rain on the roof. I don't apologise for the rain because it's something we need anyway. So I've tipped the car on its side and I'm working on the side of the tunnel first. Move some things out of the way. The pattern I've started to make is for the side. Now I've had to screw up the floor to make sure that the depth of the repair section is right. So I spent a fair bit of time screwing things in to make it solid. It's actually just with the screws and the clecos, it's actually tightened everything up quite nicely. Anyway, so the floor level is right, which enables me to make the pattern. Had to drill the rivets out, oh not the rivets, the spot welds out here. That's always a cow of a job, trying to get them out. And I've got those out because I've got to replace the panel which goes under this piece here. Into the back here there's a rusted section out in the corner. So I've got to extend this pattern right to the rear here and actually beyond that. So I know the distance I've got to extend that, so that's not an issue. So I'm pretty right with this section. Now this end piece here, not as damaged as the other side, so I've made a pattern for the repair that I'll put into there. So that's pretty right. That's all of these are fairly simple folds. This mark here that I've done, say, with the dirty finger technique, that's where the new seatbelt mounting has to come through, because I'll be replacing the mounting. That's all rusted out, and I've got a new bolt to put in, so a new nut, captive nut to put in. This section here, haven't started that yet. I've just cleaned it up. I know what I've got to repair. This is a more complicated shape. It also has a couple of captive nuts here for the handbrake mount. And I've taken the bracket off here to be able to get access to the rest of the panel. But I'll wait until I've got this piece in first, because this actually attaches under here. It actually comes under. So it's got a flange on this, comes under this panel. Missing all the bottom end of that. I know what it looks like, and so I've got a couple of photos off the internet of repairs that have been made to one of these. So it's got a bottom lip that comes up. This curve extends down here. It's got a hole through here where the cable goes through. But this is a different shape, so it gradually curves around and then takes a dive down there. So anyway, that's for a later session. But at this stage, almost ready to start cutting out the repair sections. So just tack those in place, just with a bit of tape. This will give me the oversized pattern. Just take that off. I probably don't need to cut all that metal off, but I'll make the pattern a little bit, or the repair section a little bit larger, and make the decision where I'll put the cut. At this stage, I'll just finish off these patterns so I can start making the repair sections. Now I've fabricated the repair pieces. The main one for the tunnel is here, goes all the way through. You see it behind there. It's over length, so it sticks out a bit at the back. I'll trim that off. I've just marked with a scribe along the tunnel there where I've got to cut it. Also in there I've scribed it, but I'll probably cut this from the other, or scribe that on the other side too, where it's got to go. So that will now have to be cut out, the old rusted bit. I've made up this little corner section. I haven't scribed it along there yet because I've actually got to cut this back lip so I can make that flush with the new panel. So I won't do that until I've cut this back one out. But you know, the piece is fabricated. So now it's a case of pulling all this apart again and cutting it, and then putting a sufficient gap in there to butt weld that. Oh, and also I've got to drill this for the plug welds, so I haven't done that yet either. And I also haven't put the captive nut there for the seatbelt mount, so I've got to do that as well. Right, now I've cut and fitted the repair section here. Put all the plug weld holes, so I've got all those in place. The seatbelt mount, that's what, sorry, hold the camera straight. That's what these plug welds are for. There's the plate. It actually goes up beyond the repair section, and it goes in behind this panel here for added strength. Now my plate, same thickness but a lot larger than the original plate. So that's all ready to start welding up. I'll start by putting the seatbelt captive nut in. There's the nut. I've got to weld to the other side of the plate. Then I'll plug weld the plate onto the repair section, and then I'll put the repair section, weld that onto the tunnel. So that's ready to go. Just a little bit more clean up to do on this before I do all of that. I've got to cut this flange back so I can put the repair section in and cut the shape of the repair section. So I'll make sure I do that before I weld this in. I've finished off the repair section. This is it with all the plug weld holes drilled. I've put the new seat belt mount on the rear. That's plug welded all in through there. The next thing I'm going to do is to slides in there. I've got to clamp it up at the rear here through the back of the tunnel, and I'll put a few of these welding clamps on. What I intend to do is to put a few tack welds in here first, make sure I've got the right position in relation to the floor, and then I'll remove the floor and finish the weld. Now the reason for that is it's a lot easier to actually weld this if I don't have the floor in place. So I'll tip the car on its side and I'll weld that in, and I'll also be able to tip the car over and get access to the rear there, which I'll weld from the inside of the tunnel. So that's what I'm about to do. The next shot will be the panel welded in. Everything seems to be right. I'll just put another piece of the jigsaw out here. This little repair section here, that's been done, and when I've got the other one in place, I'll finalise the fitting and weld that in too. So everything's going well. I've now welded these repair sections in, this one with the seatbelt mount and the bottom edge there. I've just put welded that in, so that's fitted quite nicely. The challenging one is going to be this. Now I've just bolted a temporary floor position in there using the Crossmember. Now I'll just use that to work out a pattern for the repair section. Now it's going to have to be made, or certainly I'm going to have to make it in more than one piece. Not too sure how many pieces at this stage. It's mainly because of its shape. It curves up at the end, and I assume it comes over with the flange there. This side here curves up and then comes over to a flat section here, then it comes up again, and then it has a flange under here. So this has got a few angles, as well as having a hole for the cable here that goes down to the floor, and then it has a piece that's angled. Now I'll probably draw the line where this finishes. It doesn't finish flush with that. It comes down and in somehow. So I've got to work that out. This section here would go straight to the floor, but this section goes down, so it's got a curve down in below there. So I've got to work all that out. So I'd say at this stage it's going to be made in a few pieces, so I'll show how I make that. But at this stage I've got to work out how I'm going to do it. The other thing here, I've got the captive nuts I've got to put in here for the mounting of the handbrake. So yes, a few things to think about. This one will take a little bit longer.